Woo! That is a funny looking lip. Wow. Okay, this is the first time filming in the studio. I'm not sure if this is like the perfect lighting setup yet. I hope you guys can see up close and up my pores. We'll see. Anyways, okay, so I've been wanting to film this video for a really long time, and I think the title is gonna be a bit jarring, and I wanna clarify because it's actually very important to me that the idea of having rules with makeup is like not a thing, and I think anyone can do whatever they want, and I think if it makes you feel good, whether it's in the parameters of the rules or what's flattering or any of that, that does not matter. If you like it, you can do whatever you want. Makeup truly has no rules. That being said, the point of this video is more to help people who maybe don't know where to start and they haven't kind of figured out their own exploration and they kind of just want a foolproof guide and some tips that I find that I tend to lean towards when I do my makeup. I just remember when I was younger, before I went to makeup school or even became a professional makeup artist, I would watch videos like this on YouTube because I wanted to learn, and I think it's a really great way to have a very like kind of harsh contrast and like literally see a do and a don't and see the variance of the technique. Actually, that just reminded me, I was thinking, should I draw a literal line down my face and then do like the do's and the don'ts on one side? Is that too dramatic? I kind of think we should do it. Okay, wait, let me grab an eyeliner. Okay, now this is gonna be annoying because if I don't get this straight, do I like this lighting? I need to take a look because I don't know if I like this. Okay, I've decided I think I do like this setup, but let me know. Obviously, I'm playing around with the new studio and I would like your advice. So if you think this is good, I think it's nice. I really, there's nothing I hate more when I watch makeup tutorials and the lighting is like so soft and you can't actually see any pores. Or I think these people put like literally like video face filters on afterwards, which that is so not helpful, especially when you're trying to learn makeup. So my goal is to have a very crisp, clear, high def, like you can see my pores and the food that could be in my teeth. Like I want it to be very crystal clear and sharp because I find that very helpful technically when learning about makeup. So I hope we're doing the thing. Okay, so I'm gonna do this line. Let's hope, like I have absolutely zero confidence in myself that I will be able to do a straight line right now. Oh no. Oh no. It's not my best work. Okay. Okay, there we go. So this side is gonna be the do's and this side is gonna be the don'ts. I'm gonna show you first the don'ts and I'll show you how I like to kind of correct things or the techniques that I like to follow. Okay, so the very first thing we're gonna start with is primer. Now I know the makeup industry is trying to sell you a million different products. I understand it is partly a marketing technique and it's kind of worked. And we all believe that we have to have this super expensive, crazy primer as our base of makeup or else it won't work. So I'm gonna be taking a pore minimizing primer, which a lot of these more kind of like blurring primers typically have a lot of silicone ingredients inside, and that gives you that really kind of like silky feeling, which feels amazing. But on top of that, in terms of makeup, it can actually make your makeup kind of roll off and kind of like ball up if you put too much of the product on. So I'm gonna put on quite a generous amount primer on this side of my face, and I'm gonna be putting this all over my skin. And it's actually so sad because I feel like a lot of people do this with the intentions or the hopes to make their foundation look smoother, but in reality, it can actually exaggerate texture, make your foundation move more, and honestly, overall, just kind of add an extra layer of thickness to your makeup that you might not be going for. So on the do side, I'm actually just gonna leave my skin. I've done my skincare routine. What I normally recommend is if you have a good skincare routine with a good moisturizer and a good SPF, then you really should be good to go unless you do have additional skincare concerns. So someone like me, 5 years ago, I was dealing with pretty extreme acne, and I did love to use pore smoothing primers at that time because I was dealing with a lot of texture. And for me, if I just used a little amount, not too much, it helped me kind of blur and mattify the areas that were very like tender cysts and like juicy pimples. So in that case, I think it's worth it. And I think, say if you have extreme facial dryness and you want to go in with something that's a bit more moisturizing, obviously that is an option, but I would encourage you to explore good skincare first as a base, because if you have a good moisturizer and your skin is relatively normal and not too problematic, then honestly a good moisturizer should be all you need. And that's typically the best type of base you can do for your foundation or your makeup. So this side we're gonna leave completely clear, and let's move on to foundation. Oh baby, this is gonna be fun. Okay, I'm rolling up the sleeves for this one. And I also do want to point out that makeup is a journey. Go back and watch my videos from when I first started YouTube. I think I'm doing everything that I would put on the don't side now. So we all go through phases, trust me. And makeup oftentimes is relying on trends and what the beauty standards are of that time, which are literally always fluctuating and basically impossible to attain, but that's another story. So I'm gonna start off on the don't side, and I'm going to pick a nice and full coverage foundation and something that's not exactly the right color match for me. Now, foundation coverage definitely does come down to personal preference. There isn't like a formula like if you've got clear skin, you have to wear light coverage foundation or vice versa. But the reason that I'm gonna be putting this on the don't side is because it's so full coverage and it's also the wrong undertone. Typically on myself, I mean, full transparency, I tend to lean towards more lighter coverage because I like to kind of pinpoint conceal and spot conceal, basically adding more full coverage on the areas that need it, say like a breakout or discoloration. Whereas I want the good parts of my skin to kind of remain light, and even back when I did have acne, that was always kind of my technique. It's actually not my technique, I can't take credit. I learned it from Lisa Eldridge. Eldridge? I feel like I'm saying her name wrong. It's Lisa Eldridge, right? Yeah, it totally is. I'll link her video. But that's where I originally learned that technique, and I've just taken that to the grave. And back when I used to work on film and TV, that's exactly what I would do. And I just think if you are going for the effect of the most flawless, natural looking skin, I think that's the best technique to get that effect. So I'm going with the full coverage double wear from Estee Lauder. And I'm sure you can see even on the back of my hand, it's just a bit too golden for me. I have slightly more green undertones, and when I am a bit more tan, it pulls a bit more olive. So a quick little guide to undertones if you're completely new. A good little hack is look at your veins. If your veins appear more green, then that typically means you have more of a warmer undertone. And if they appear a bit more blue, then that means you probably have a bit cooler of an undertone or more of a pinky base. So that's just kind of something you'll kind of understand the more you play around with makeup. Another really good like hack or like trick to find out what undertone you have is look at what jewelry you gravitate towards. Typically, cooler tone people tend to like silver jewelry on themselves, whereas warmer tones or more yellow based or olive kind of undertones tend to gravitate toward more gold. So also, I'm going to kind of show you a technique that I personally don't recommend, and that's actually starting with the most full coverage around the perimeter of your face. Again, no matter how good or bad your skin is, typically I like to start by putting the most coverage towards the center of the face and kind of diffusing it outwards, just because it makes the line of demarcation, which is basically like your foundation line, 10 times more visible, and it just makes it a lot harder to blend. Because if you're going from like this super flawless full coverage and then next you just got your neck skin, it's gonna kind of break the illusion a lot quicker. Now, I definitely went through a phase, which it's honestly genuinely embarrassing to admit, but I would pick a slightly darker foundation thinking that it would make me look more tan. And in fact, it never did. Spoiler, it just made me look like I had orange foundation on my skin. So that's never a good start. So if you want to look more tan, don't worry, we have bronzer for a reason. You don't need to be picking a foundation that doesn't match your skin. And of course, I'm not talking about, I mean, often our face skin is a bit lighter than the rest of our body. So oftentimes I'm not going for an exact foundation match to like this part of my skin. I'll match like the general area. So actually on camera, I don't know how this is reading. It actually doesn't look too bad on camera. In person, it's just a little bit of like the wrong undertone. I mean, I'm sure you could get away with wearing this, but that is my one tip, especially if you are gonna be more of a full coverage foundation wearer. Having more of an exact shade match is gonna be a lot more essential. Whereas if you have more of a light to medium coverage, you can kind of get away with a bit of, you know, give or take of a shade, one or two. Now I look so pinky on the one side because this is such a yellow kind of golden undertone. It's very, very warm. Okay, so I'm successfully looking a little cray. Okay, moving on to the do side of my face, I'm gonna go in with a light coverage foundation. This is MAC Face and Body, which is just my makeup artist kit staple. I'm obsessed with this foundation. There's a reason it was such a model favorite and it had so much hype around it because it is an incredible foundation. So I'm just gonna give this a little shake. Now for reference, I am C1 in this, which I believe is one of the lightest shades in Face and Body. And in the Estee Lauder, I was in the 2W. So I was a whole shade darker on the don't side. Okay, so I'm gonna take the foundation and I am going to pop it on the back of my hand. With a lighter coverage foundation, I do find you can get away more with like kind of dotting it on with your finger, but a brush works great as well. So I'm gonna start by applying this more towards the center part of my face and stippling and diffusing that outwards. Now, a good technique that I tend to like to do with foundation is to apply it directly onto my skin, either with like a finger by dotting it on. People are gonna come for me and be like, you apply your foundation with your fingers? Not entirely, but I'll dot it on initially just so it doesn't get absorbed in the brush or the tool. So I either like to apply it by, you know, using a little buffing brush like this and kind of diffusing it outwards and then going over top with a beauty blender, just because a beauty blender actually tends to absorb a lot of the product. So half of your product is getting completely wasted just upon the initial kind of like bounce into your foundation. So if you want to kind of get the most bang for your buck and make your product kind of go the furthest, I would recommend going in with the brush first. And then if you want to have that like airbrush seamless look and make sure there's no brush strokes. You can kind of go over top with a beauty blender at the end. And what I like about this is that you can really kind of see the face still kind of live and be itself underneath. And what I mean by that is you see my cheeks kind of still flush when I'm talking, and you can still see hints of like little discoloration and some of my, you know, leftover pimple marks and things like that, which I actually do like because it makes the skin look that much more believable. And like I said, you can go over top with more of a full coverage foundation on those specific areas if you feel like you need the coverage after. But at least overall, I feel like the skin looks a lot more just lifelike and natural and just kind of like my skin, but better. And the undertone in this foundation I find to be a much better match and kind of just seamlessly blends into my neck, whereas this side, there's something going on for sure. And I always like to kind of take the leftover product, run that over the tops of the eyes, and then sweep the leftovers also onto my ear, around the lobe, and just a little bit down the neck. So even already visually, I'm sure you can tell that one side looks way more flat and heavy and almost, I find, can sometimes age the skin and make the skin appear a bit older and a bit more dry looking. So again, if that's the effect you're going for, live your life, but that's typically not what I like to do with the base of my foundation. Okay, let's talk a little bit of concealer. Now, I think I've got to almost admit that I'm partially to blame for this. I mean, not me necessarily as an individual, but more of the YouTube influencer community. I feel like really popularized a bunch of under eye concealer trend that was going around, you know, the past like 4 years. It's a technique, I'm not gonna lie. And if you're someone that is predominantly on video that has studio lights around you, it will look flawless. It will look great on camera. But the reality is when you're out of that lighting situation, it's not gonna look good. It will look cakey. And I completely understand why it is a thing, because especially if you are going in with a full coverage foundation like we have on this side, you do need to have a lot of brightness and really contrasted colors to bring dimension back into your face. So that's initially why this technique got so popularized. It's actually often a very similar technique that a lot of drag queens do. But again, they're often on stage with a bunch of really big studio lights. And the other reason why I put this color specifically on the don't side is because, again, of the undertone. Typically with a concealer, I do like to kind of make it double as a color corrector as well, just to kind of reduce the amount of product on the skin. And under the eye, typically more of a peachy color works well best with my under eye color, just because I do have a bit of kind of blueness under my eyes. So more of an orangey kind of peachy based color cancels that out. So I basically get a concealer and a color correcting brightness effect all in one. So that's why I typically don't like to go for a light yellow concealer under my eyes, because it just doesn't look natural. And it actually still doesn't really cancel out the color that I'm looking to correct. Okay, so I'm really doing that eye brightening and lifting, snatched kind of effect. And I mean, already in person, you can see I have quite a bit of makeup on, and it almost is exaggerating any bit of bump or texture on my face. And to be fair, that side of my face doesn't really have any breakouts, but my skin looks 10 times more textured right now. Okay, so it is definitely very bright and awake on that side. On the other side, I'm just gonna go in with more of a peachy based concealer. This is the NARS Creamy Concealer. And I'm just gonna be a lot more deliberate with the application. So I'm gonna kind of prime the brush and really get the product in there good first, instead of just like directly applying onto the skin. And basically my two areas of concern when it comes to my under eyes is this kind of darker pocket here and a little bit of darkness towards the edge. So I'm gonna kind of give myself the same kind of lifted and brightened eye effect, but with a quarter of the product. And the color correction is gonna be a lot more effective because it's more of like a peachy kind of pink based color. By just going into the socket, which I know everyone always says, oh, I've got the worst under eye bags. And definitely, obviously darkness is a thing, discoloration is a thing, but the reality is we are humans. This is the orbital bone. It's the socket where our eyes go in. There is gonna be a bit of a divot there, but with the illusion of neutralizing the color, it can give the appearance of a much smoother texture in that there's no divot or darker contour there. So I'm just taking the leftover product and I'm just kind of stamping it up along in that shape. So I'm gonna also still get the lifted effect, but with way less product, ultimately making your skin look that much more natural. I think with a lot of makeup, it's also really easy to convince yourself that if you don't have the most high-end expensive makeup, your makeup isn't gonna look good, and that's just not the truth. A lot of it, I'd say 50-50. It's 50% the product, but 50% the technique as well. You really can give your makeup a whole new life just by kind of switching up and refining the techniques that you're using. Okay, so next up, we're gonna move on to setting the face. I have a translucent powder here. On the don't side, we're gonna load up the brush quite heavily. We're basically just going to set the entire face. Now, the only time that I would go ahead and do this is one, if you are on camera and you want absolutely no shine, particularly if you're in theater or on stage and you want something that's very long lasting, or if you have extremely, extremely oily skin. But other than that, I rarely would ever go in and powder myself or any client's entire face. Now on the do side, I am just gonna take more of a small kind of tapered brush. I love this one for under the eyes because it's nice and little and just kind of fits in the under eye socket perfectly. So I just kind of like to press and stamp there, and I kind of stamp along my smile lines and just a little bit left over on the nose there. So I know my face well enough at this point that I know where makeup tends to move on me, and the point of setting is to kind of lock and reinforce any of the cream products underneath. So on myself, I will get a bit of creasing under my eyes just because I'm very expressive and I move my face a lot when I talk. Also a little bit on the crow's feet and smile line, and that's just from natural movement, and that's gonna happen. Makeup will settle naturally throughout the day, but just a little bit of setting powder does help prevent that. And then on myself, I do have more combo skin, so I know that the sides of my nose get a little bit oily throughout the day, so just a light little dusting of powder is the way to go on myself. This will obviously change a little bit depending on your skin type and your skin needs, and also how often you like to touch up your face throughout the day. I'm the type of person, I don't bring makeup with me when I kind of go out. Whatever goes on my face is how it's kind of gonna stay. I'm not really a big touch-up person, so I find that is enough powder for me to kind of go from start to the end of the day, and that's just what works for me. Ooh, okay, we're gonna move on to cream bronzer / cream contour. We're gonna start off with the don't side, and I think the first thing to say is just bronzer and contour are not the same thing, actually. Now, I can see why there is a lot of confusion around bronzing and contouring and why people might think they are similar. Basically, bronzing gives you that more bronze, sun-kissed kind of look. It typically is a bit more diffused over the face, and yeah, it looks like you've just, been at the beach a little bit. Whereas contour is something that you do to add dimension and more shadows back into the face to give you more depth. So typically contour colors do tend to be a bit more cool and undertone to kind of replicate that shadow appearance. And typically you're not gonna be putting a contour in all of the areas that you would be putting a bronzer. Typically contouring is a bit more precise and specific with where you place it. So that being said, we're gonna do a bronzer. I've got a cream bronzer stick here. This is Terracotta Tan from Nude Sticks. And on the don't side, we're gonna do the good old 2013 Beauty Guru tip of the 3E, which this is how I learned how to do bronzer when I didn't know anything about makeup. So you do a 3 and an E. That's what I was told. Yeah. Okay, where do I begin? Definitely quick and efficient. Like you just kind of get it on there. What I don't like about this is that you're putting the cream directly onto the face, which can actually disrupt and kind of pull off the foundation underneath, which I just don't think is a good thing. Oftentimes you also apply a lot more than you want to. I also honestly just don't really like the 3E shape. So those are kind of, I guess, my criticisms with that. I just find it also a lot harder to kind of blend and move the product once it's on the face. It becomes too dried down and there's not enough slip in the product. And especially since this is more of a matte side anyways, your skin just kind of like absorbs it. Okay, and then I'm just going to blend that out a bit more. I mean, I'm sure you can see already it is just getting a bit muddy and just like a bit much. Okay, now we're gonna go ahead and do the do side. So I'm gonna take the product, and again, I'm sure you could guess it, I'm gonna warm it up on the back of my hand. So I'm gonna probably use that much bronzer for the entire face. So I'm going to, again, kind of prime that brush, really get the product in there, and I'm gonna start at the most like outward part of the face. Basically gonna be the opposite technique of what we did with the foundation. The foundation, you want the most coverage in the center going outwards. Bronzer, you want the edges going in. So I'm gonna start kind of in like the hairline. So I'm just really gonna kind of get this all up in my hair and start at the temples and kind of bringing that forward on the forehead a bit. I'm gonna take that same product, same thing on the cheek, start kind of back towards like the tragus, and then just kind of gently buff that in and upwards on the cheek. I'm also gonna take a little bit of that bronzer and kind of put that through the socket as well. This I just find makes more of like a monochromatic kind of cohesive feel to the makeup, which I just think feels very fresh and modern. But it also just makes it look a bit more natural. I'm also gonna take a little bit of that and just bring that on the nose. Okay, back onto the don't side. We're gonna go in now with a powder bronzer to kind of reinforce that color. I actually love the formula of these bronzers. These are the Hourglass Ambient Lighting Bronzer. This is just way too dark for my skin tone right now. And that's why it's gonna be on the don't side, because this typically tends to pull very orange and can look very Cheeto instantly on my skin. So the other reason this is going to be on the don't side is because this is going to be applied with a very big fluffy brush, which is definitely good for diffusion, but can also just make things a bit too messy and chaotic. So I'm going to load the brush up and we're going to kind of reinforce that 3E. So this type of brush is just a little too big for the product and it just kind of gets it everywhere. You can kind of create that like messy, muddy kind of bronzer look, which I don't think a lot of us are trying to go for. So I'm sure you can see it's just a bit jarring, honestly. It is just a bit intense. Okay, and for the do side, I'm gonna take a matte bronzer and I'm gonna actually apply this on more of a precise brush. You definitely do want more of like a fluffy and soft bristled brush, but you don't need it to be that big of a brush. It can be a bit smaller and more precise, just so you have a bit more control with the application. So I'm gonna do the same thing. I've loaded up the brush. What I actually tend to like to do with a lot of powder products is use the lid as like a bit of a palette. And again, you just kind of prime the product in the brush a bit more. Now this is something that I've done since I started doing my makeup, but I realized that Katie Jane Hughes, who's a makeup artist that I love, I think she's amazing, she calls it like priming your brushes. So now I've started calling it priming my brushes. It's the perfect word to explain what you're doing. You're just making sure the powder is evenly on all the bristles and you're gonna be good to go, and it's not like this harsh kind of stark application when you first go to the face. So I'm gonna take this brush and I'm gonna start at the same areas where we put the cream and just slightly kind of reinforce that color a little bit. But I like to kind of go in short strokes and build up slowly. Make sure it's all blended without applying any more product. Okay, moving on to some contour. I love me some contour. I really love, honestly, with makeup, the idea of sculpting and adding shape, but there definitely is a bit of a learning curve, I feel like, to it. Okay, so the reason that I'm putting this on the don't side, and it's that typical kind of Instagram contour technique, and it's doing a very harsh line on your cheek, but it always kind of doesn't make sense to me because it anatomically just doesn't make sense with how the face is structured, because a cheekbone naturally has a bit of curve and dimension. There's no, like, just putting a line through the face doesn't do anything. If anything, it can often widen it and kind of give the opposite effect. So I'm gonna kind of show you what I mean. Typically, I find people like to use more of these thin kind of straight brushes like this. So I'm gonna load the brush on with the contour color, which is more of that gray-based color. And I mean, this can either be done with the cream contour or powder. It's just more the actual like application. That is the reason it's on the don't side. So people like to, do the little like line it up, and then put a harsh, okay, oh, that was a lot. This harsh line. And then people just go back and forth to blend it. And I think people have the right, intention and the right idea. This technique honestly often just makes you look typically a bit more skeletal versus giving you the cheekbone dimension that I think people often are trying to go for. And the idea of blending back and forth is something that in my early days I used to do, but I'm gonna show you on the other side what I tend to go for now. Okay, so for the do side, I'm gonna go in with the exact same powder and I'm gonna apply it on a smaller angled brush. And the idea with the contour on this side is I want to kind of create a bit of a curvature and kind of follow the natural cheek that I have. And instead of just creating one layer of dark line, we're going to kind of create like an ombre like shadow, basically replicating what an actual shadow looks like. If you look at anything that has different highlights and shadows, you'll see that it's typically not one stripe of highlight, one stripe of shadow, unless you're in like direct sun. Typically, if things are, a 3D object and have, any type of curve to them, it's like a gradient of color. So it's that same idea just on your cheek. So you can start with the darkest area, coming back, and you can kind of feel where your actual bones are. It's gonna look a lot more natural and believable if you go with the actual shape of your face. And sure, you can kind of cheat shapes a bit more, but you do kind of want to start from the natural starting place and we can kind of exaggerate from there. So we're gonna kind of start with that color towards the ear, and I'm kind of blending actually in an up and down motion. So I typically bring the product up to kind of give it that roundness, and I find it makes my cheeks look a lot healthier, and you actually get a way more believable cheekbone. And actually, there was this amazing makeup artist who works for Cirque du Soleil. I'll have the video linked up above. This was maybe about 2.5, 3 years ago now, and I went to Cirque du Soleil. It was like the best experience ever, and I was chatting through the makeup artist who designs all of these amazing looks for on stage, and she really reframed the whole idea of contouring cheeks. And now I always basically just go upwards and I never blend back and forth. A little rule of thumb that I actually have, and this is maybe a bit more specific towards my face, but maybe it'll be applicable to anyone at home watching, is I don't like any of my contour to come back the edge of my, the end of my eye. I couldn't figure out what that word was. So I definitely don't want to be applying any product directly any place beyond there, but I actually try to make sure that the end of my blend is what stops there. And these are honestly just all the little things that I've kind of found through trial and error. Now I sometimes take a little bit of contour powder and kind of go up the temple just a little bit. I am someone who has more of a wide face, so I kind of like to balance it out a little bit. And then I do like to take a little bit of contour powder and just pop a little bit under the jawline there. Now you do want to be careful that it doesn't look like you've, again, just mismatched your foundation. You just want to add a little bit of an illusion of a shadow, which I find just makes the jawline pop a little bit more. And then I'm just going to run a little bit of that through the socket and just down the side of the nose. And then my favorite little hack with contour, if you've been watching any of my other tutorials, I'm sure you've heard me talk about this before. I love to take contour powder and go under the bottom lip. It just creates the illusion of fullness and a more pouty bottom lip, but in a lot more believable way than overlining extremely. So I'm just gonna, with a soft shader brush, add a little bit of shadow starting towards the center and diffusing it out. So just a little bit like that. Okay, woohoo, this is getting fun. Oh, I am not liking this side of my face. Okay, we gotta do the baking. I need to find my baking powder. Let's talk about baking. Now, again, baking is a technique great for on camera, on stage, looks amazing on video for the most part. For everyday wear, it can be hit or miss. Again, if you like that look, you do you, boo. But for the everyday person, do I recommend it? Not necessarily. So I'm going to take a lighter kind of baking powder, and we're gonna use this to carve out the face on the don't side. And this just kind of reinforces the highlights and kind of makes it pop a bit more. So we're gonna do under the eyes. I know a lot of people like to kind of go down the sides of the nose. And if you're someone who has normal to dry skin, this technique will probably not be the most flattering. Even if you do have extremely oily skin, in natural lighting, it will appear a bit more cakey. So the technique I often see is like kind of carving out the cheekbone, which definitely creates a contrast, but it definitely is more of a theatrical technique, I find. And then for the do side, I'm just gonna leave it blank and not do any baking. I think baking is something that in a certain moment can be used for like this kind of everyday look. I'm just gonna skip out on it. Okay, next we're gonna do blush. I'm so excited to talk about blush. I'm like very obsessed with blush on a personal level. It's just a makeup product I really enjoy. And I've actually had a lot of fun over the past year kind of changing up my blush placement and really finding what works best for me. And starting off with the don't side, I'm gonna take the ever so famous NARS Orgasm blush because I'm sure a lot of you have this in your collection. And first off, I'm going to grab quite a dense, fluffy brush, which typically I think people are told these are blush brushes, and I like to challenge that, and I will show you what I like to use on the do side. But what we're gonna do on the don't side is take this, swirl it around, blow on the brush. Oh, that is for sure a don't. I hate, this is more of a makeup pet peeve. I cannot handle when people blow on their brushes. I'm like, either tap it off or like brush it off. I just hate the idea of blowing on your brush. I don't know why, I always have. So we've got a loaded blush brush, and we're gonna do the technique. You know it, you know what's coming, I'm sure you do. Smile and apply to the apples. So I'm gonna let you know why I do not like this technique. Okay, this is looking a little crazy. Okay, so the reason that I don't like the kind of smile and apply technique is because when you smile, your cheek goes up there, and then when you relax, it falls down. Then you end up having blush placed right there, which in most cases I don't find is the most flattering placement. I find blush placement is a really easy way to kind of make the makeup application look a lot sloppier and maybe less refined. Even just kind of like the swirling technique, it's not necessarily the most flattering application. So I'm just gonna try to blend this out a bit more because I think I did maybe apply this a little bit too heavy of a hand. I mean, obviously I feel like I am exaggerating a little bit just so that way you can really see like the stark contrast between the two. I think that pretty much communicates the point. Okay, and on the do side, I'm gonna go in with a cream blush. This is the Nude Sticks in the nude blush here. And I'm gonna do the same technique, I'm sure you know it by now. Apply a bit to your hand and kind of work off of there. Now, I definitely don't have anything against powder blushes. I actually tend to like them a lot, but I also am a huge fan of cream product just because they blend and typically kind of melt into the skin a bit better. So I'm gonna go in with this. I'm gonna find a synthetic brush. Now, blush typically tends to fade the quickest on me, so I sometimes will reinforce a cream blush with a powder. But for the do side, what's really important and where I think the biggest difference is comes down to the actual application. I've actually been loving to put my blush a bit higher than normal, more kind of on the tops of the cheekbones and kind of pulling it back. I just find it kind of lifts the face, it's super flattering, and yeah, it just kind of gives you more of like that sun sun-kissed, natural kind of flush look. I find, I mean, look at yourself when you get flushed. Like, where does the blood kind of rush to in your face? I tend to get more flushed on this part of my face versus like right in here. That's more like, I get flushed here when I'm like sweating and like working out, but if I'm just like naturally blushing, it tends to be a bit higher. So I'm just gonna take this product and kind of pull it back, almost layering it on top of where we put that bronzer earlier. And when I'm applying this, I'm trying to keep as still as a face as possible. I'm not like contorting it or smiling or moving it around. I'm applying it to my face when it's resting because I get the most accurate placement when I do that. So now just taking whatever I have left over, I actually like to take a little bit of blush just onto like the highest outer point of my forehead, if that makes any sense. Mine personally tends to line up with the top of the arch of my brow, and just popping a little bit of blush there just makes the skin have a bit more life to it. And again, just in the name of being monochromatic, I like to take a little bit on my brush and just pull that through the eye socket as well. So I'm sure just from looking, you'll be able to see that this side of my face is appearing a bit more like lifted, and this side feels a bit more like heavy and like it's getting kind of pulled down and weighted down a little bit. Okay, next up, we're gonna do eyebrows. I am gonna come back to highlighter after. I just like to do my brows before highlight. It's kind of a weird personal preference. So on the don't side, I'm gonna take a pencil liner, a pencil eyebrow brush, an eyebrow pencil. This is my first time filming late at night, and maybe I shouldn't. So this is more at myself. So at Jaclyn Forbes 5 years ago, this is what I used to do, and I look back and I just don't like it on myself. So I'm going in with number 4. This is the Benefit Precisely My Brow, and I used to use this exact pencil every single day, every single time I did my makeup. And I am naturally, I'd say like a medium tone brunette. It probably is appearing a bit darker on camera. And on myself, I actually typically like to go for either a blonde or like a medium ash brown color on myself. I like to go super cool tone and way lighter than my actual eyebrow color, just because I found if you match your exact hair color, it can look very harsh and almost a bit unnatural, especially if you're filling in your eyebrows quite a bit. So that is why I'm gonna put this darker color on the don't side. But the other reason is because of the actual technique. So what I used to do when I would fill in my eyebrows, I would start by kind of tracing the bottom line of it. I would do the tail, fill that in, try to create that perfect Instagram eyebrow shape. I mean, I'm sure you all remember the time where we were like truly measuring and doing all of the markups. And what I used to do is do the line up into the head of my eyebrow, and then I would take the spoolie and kind of fade it out, so I would get that little fade on my eyebrows, and then I would, on the back 2/3 of my eyebrows, make that shape. Now, I have nothing against a defined eyebrow. I think there's very specific makeup looks, and there's moments when I actually want to do that type of shape, but that shape combined with a way too dark color for my eyebrows, it's not the look for me. Okay, moving on to the do side, I'm gonna be doing some feathered eyebrows. Now, it definitely is a more bushy eyebrow look, but it's actually a lot lighter in tone because I actually don't go in with as harsh of a color, and I don't fill in as much, and I don't use as much actual product on the brows. So I'm gonna show you how I do my brows now, and I personally find these to be flattering with my eyebrow shape. I naturally have fairly full eyebrows. So I'm just gonna take a brow gel. I've got the 24-hour brow setter here, and I actually kind of like to back comb the product into the brows. And this is basically a technique that you can do with soap. You can do soap brows. I also like to use hair gel sometimes, literally whatever you have on hand. And I'm just going to kind of get the product through and basically laminate my brows upward and just press and stick them upright. Now, I just find this to be, again, very modern and fresh. It feels very editorial and high fashion, and I just love the look of it right now. Now, again, someone please play this video in 5 years when I'm probably like, oh my God, who let me do that to my eyebrows? Again, that's the fun of makeup. Trends are changing. This is what I like right now. I even take the back of my palette knife and I just really seal those suckers in. So if you have a glycerin-based soap, it will do this as well. Just mix a bit of water and soap. Or if you have like gotta be glued like hair gel, that works great as well. Now, I personally am someone who likes to do my eyebrows after foundation because I like there to be foundation in between like the spikes of my eyebrows, if that makes any sense. But I know a lot of people like to do eyebrows first. I've just truly never been that kind of way. Okay, now what I'm gonna do on this side, I'm gonna go in with an eyebrow marker. Now this is gonna sound scary. I was like super intimidated by it at first. This is the Urban Decay Brow Blade. I use Cool Cookie, and this is a very cool light brown color. And I like to go for more of that ashier color just because it looks more believable. Typically any browns that are more of like a true brown, they have a lot of red in them, so they pull very warm, and it just looks a bit unnatural on most people's eyebrows, I find. So I like to go for more of an ashier color. I'm gonna take this really fine tip kind of marker, and just on like a few little bald spots on the tail, I'm just gonna do little tiny flicks, and that's gonna kind of fill them in a little bit. So you can see it's just much lighter on that side of my face, even though the actual brow is much bigger. Okay, now let's go back to highlight. I've got the ever so famous Becca. This actually isn't Champagne Pop, this is Opal, which is another really pretty color. And I'm just gonna be a bit heavy-handed. That's kind of the don't. It's just a very liberal application. So I'm just gonna take this on the cheekbone and kind of swirl it. And I'm kind of basically applying it from temple to the front of the cheek. Apply it on the brow bone, and then also apply it on the side of the nose. Yeah, I just think it makes my nose look bad. I'm also gonna take that highlight and I am gonna apply that on the inner corner, which I don't think that's inherently bad. Oh, can't forget the Cupid's bow. Now this is quite a frosty color. It kind of comes back to undertones. So Opal is more, I would say, neutral in tone. It has a bit of kind of like silvery gold, so it kind of mixes in the two. But again, if you are more warm tone, more of a golden-y color is gonna probably suit you best. And then if you're cooler, more of a silvery or cooler or like pinky kind of color might be a bit more flattering. Now on the dew side, I'm gonna take a very dewy product. This is the Glossier Halo Scope, and this is in the shade Quartz. And this is, again, another cream-based product, and it kind of gives you like a reflective sheen, but without being like too powdery or too thick, and without being too sticky as well. It's a really good kind of in-between kind of product. Now you can apply this with a brush, but I actually kind of like to take it directly on my finger, and I'll just kind of like pop that on the top of the cheekbone, just to kind of give my face a bit more dew and a bit of light. Now I do like to be a bit more selective with where I put my more cream highlight, just because it can move around a bit. So if I am gonna highlight, say, the Cupid's bow or the inner corner, I typically go for a powder. So I've got the Charlotte Tilbury Film Star Bronze and Glow. I'm gonna use the Glow shade in there. And this is a really nice kind of light golden champagne color. I'm gonna just hit the top of my Cupid's bow very lightly, and then I'm gonna pop a little bit on the inner corner, and just whatever's left over, a little bit on the brow bone, and just a little on the temple, just so when you kind of turn the head, you hit the light. Okay, so first I'm gonna talk a little bit about eyeshadow. On the don't side, I'm gonna focus a little bit just more on shape and kind of not following the natural eye shape. I think obviously eyeshadow looks can vary so much, whether you're doing like a super shimmery lid or a cut crease or a super elongated eye shape. Like, you can do so much with the shadows. So I'm just gonna show you a very simplified version of a don't. So I'm gonna start by taking a darker kind of shimmery color and applying that on the outer third. What I'm gonna do when I'm blending, I'm just kind of going in like circular motions, but I'm not really focused on the shape that I'm creating, and it's kind of diffusing the product and making it kind of fall a bit lower. So again, it's just a bit more of like a sloppier application and not necessarily flattering my natural eye shape. Then I'm gonna take that same color and run that under the lower lash line. And I'm gonna bring that all the way in. I'm just gonna try to build up that color a bit more. Also, with applying darker colors directly like this with a fluffier brush, you typically tend to get a lot more fallout, and oh yeah, we definitely have fallout there. Then the other reason this is gonna be a don't is because I'm not gonna switch out on a brush at all. Typically, I do like to have a clean blending brush, and that will just help blend out the product. Whereas if you're blending with the same brush you applied with, it's just gonna get a little muddy again. Okay, now I'm gonna do my best to try to sweep away this fallout. And now I'm getting a bit of like a gray cast even just from all those products layered on there. And then for this side, I'm just gonna pop it with quite a shimmery, but I'm kind of bringing this a little high onto the crease, so I'm not really following my natural eye shape. So to me, this is just a bit messy and a bit undefined, and I just don't find it to be the most flattering. Now, where on this side, what I really like to do with eyeshadow is actually kind of do like the less is more approach. On more of an everyday look, I just kind of like to sculpt the crease a bit more, just do more of like a simple matte kind of eyeshadow look. So I like to actually take a small defined kind of like pencil brush. Actually, it's perfect for kind of going into the crease. And I'm gonna take these medium brown kind of crease colors. You could also totally use your bronzer for this. And I'm just gonna start by kind of tilting my head back a little bit and kind of applying that on like the outer V. I'm also gonna kind of connect this into my lash line, which is gonna help us on our next step when we get to liner. And again, I'm just kind of diffusing that color in to kind of prep for blending. Now I'm gonna go in with a clean, fluffy brush and just kind of buff that product out. And this is gonna give us a much softer, more flattering shape. Now, sometimes I will run a little bit bit of that just on the outer kind of corner here, but I don't like to drag it in all the way on myself. I find it just kind of makes my eye shape too rounded down there, and I already have quite a rounded lower lash line, so I find it just drags my eye down just a little too much. So I just kind of like to keep that focused on the outer corner. Then for the second eyeshadow shade, I'm just gonna kind of mix these lighter kind of colors together. It has a little bit of shimmer, but not too much. And I'm just gonna kind of pop that on the center and almost kind of do like a cut crease, but in a lot softer of a way. I'm gonna focus more on the inner corner of the crease now and blend this in with the darker medium tone browns we just put on. This I just find opens up the eye really nicely. And again, kind of going back to the idea of just kind of creating a bit of dimension, but not looking like we're doing too much. Even though we are doing the absolute most, let me be clear. Now I'm just gonna go back in with that highlighter that I used on the inner corner, the Charlotte one, and I'm actually gonna kind of pull the inner corner highlight up into the crease as well. I find pulling the highlight up is just an absolute game changer. It really just makes your eye shape pop. Okay, just like that. Okay, so now we're gonna move on to liner. We're gonna start with the don't side, and I'm going to take a liquid liner. This one here is just an Urban Decay one, and this is more of a regular size felt tip liner. And the reason this is gonna be a don't is because it's gonna be a bit thick and not proportionate to my eye shape. Okay, so it's actually not a bad application in the sense, like, I made sure I was clean and precise with my lines, but the reason that this is on the don't side is because I just find on my eye shape a full liner to be a little unflattering on the eye. I don't necessarily have hooded eyes, but when I am kind of looking forward, the center of my brow bone does kind of touch the center of my lash. So when I'm looking forward, you can't see my entire lid. So if I'm gonna be doing a full winged liner, it kind of gets chopped off and you kind of miss some pieces when I'm looking forward. So I just find it doesn't really look cohesive. Also, the other reason that I put this on the don't side is because I didn't do any sort of blending. What I've really grown to love is more of a soft smoked out liner. It just tends to look a bit gentler, whereas this can look a bit harsh, and kind of going back to the same theory with like the contour, just this line coming out of nowhere. Sometimes it can just look so intense and not really make much sense, especially if it's not at the right angle. So there is the don't. Let's move on to the do and what I love to do. I'm gonna go back into the eyeshadow palette. I'm gonna take this kind of matte, dark, chocolatey brown color, and I'm gonna pick up an angled eyeliner brush. I'm gonna kind of start to stamp and create a little bit of the shadow of where I want the liner to be. This is one, not only gonna help you out when you do your liner and make it a lot easier because you have a bit of a guide, but it's also gonna kind of create a bit of a transition between just your regular eyelid and then to where the harsh dark black eyeliner is going. It's just like with eyeshadow, how you would use a transition shade when going into a darker color. You wanna use like a bit of a transition shade when going into your liner. It definitely gives you a bit smokier of an appearance, so it definitely does create a bit of a different effect, but I just really have grown to love it. Now on my eye shape, since I do have a bit more of my outer corner exposed when I'm looking forward, that's basically where I like to focus my liner. So I basically just do like a 1/3 liner on the outer third of my eye. Okay, so there we go. The base of the liner is there. Now I'm gonna go in with the Stila liner. This one's actually personally my favorite. It's actually the micro tip one. It's a super teeny tiny little felt tip brush, but it's really great because it gives me a lot of control, so I can get in there and do like a little baby flick. But what I like to do when I'm working, I like to have a different angled brush, one that doesn't have that eyeshadow powder on it, and I'm going to take this and kind of keep this really close by so I can kind of gently diffuse the liquid liner out as I'm working, just to create a bit softer of a shape. So I'm gonna have to get close up to the mirror for this. I hope you can still see. Okay, so just like that, just like a little teeny baby little liner. I'm gonna try to hold my face as neutral as possible so that way you can see the difference between the two and just kind of the different effects that you get through those different techniques. Okay, so moving back over to the don't side, I'm gonna apply some mascara, and this is something I did all of high school, hands down. If you look at any photo of me when I started to wear makeup, I did thick, chunky mascara because I thought it made my lashes look better, but it just really didn't. So I'm just gonna do a generous application on top and bottom. And then on the do side, I'm just gonna go in with one coat just on my upper lashes. I've actually really grown to like really like mascara on myself. I'm someone who doesn't necessarily have the most blessed natural lashes, but honestly I find the more that I layer on products and the more that I do to them, the worse they look. So I just like to do one simple coat of mascara, and maybe if I'm getting crazy, I'll do a little bit on the lower lashes on the outer corner, but with a really light hand. A little tip actually that I've learned, I like to go in with a mascara kind of like brush like this, and I actually kind of comb through the backside and kind of get out any chunks just to kind of separate them a bit more and give them a bit fluffier of a look. Now we're gonna move on to some lashes. Now, even with my most full glam look, I just don't think I look good with a full strip of lashes on. I always prefer to cut them in half or use individuals. So basically the reason I'm gonna put these on the don't side is because you're not customizing the lash to your face and your look. So I'm gonna take off a full strip lash here. And even keep in mind, these are quite soft and natural lashes to begin with, but even so, I think they look bad on me. So I'm just going to take these lashes, I'm going to take some glue and basically just pop these suckers on. So we're gonna do no measuring. We're not gonna try it on the eye first. We're just gonna hope for the best at this point. Now, keep in mind, a strip of lashes is gonna be a lot easier to conceal if you do have a full liner on, versus if you were to try to put this type of lash on this baby little liner, it's gonna look a bit more wonky. So the application is actually a bit more forgiving since we have the liner on. I'm not gonna lie, these actually don't look that bad. Okay, and for the do side, I'm gonna go in with some individuals. I'm a huge fan of the Ardell single lashes. I use the shorts and the mediums, and normally I'll just like use maybe 2, 3, 4 knots max. So what I like to do is I take some of the lash glue, and you've guessed it, I pop it onto the back of my hand. Then I'm just gonna pick up the individual lash, dot it in some glue, and just pop that on the outer corner just to give a little more of like a flare. So I'm just gonna use 2 for today just to fill in the areas that were a bit more sparse. And that just gives a little bit of like a flutter on the outer part of the eye, which I think is like really dainty and pretty, and I just like the effect it gives. Now I'm gonna boost the inner corner highlight a bit more just because this is something I always do. I'm just gonna go to town, and on the don't side, I'm just gonna add way more. So I'm just gonna apply a really chunky and bright inner corner. And then on the do side, I'm gonna be a bit more precise and take a fine kind of liner brush and slowly kind of build it up. Okay, we're getting there. We're slowly getting there. Oh, how could I forget? I almost forgot. I'm gonna backpedal to the eyelashes. What I like to do on the do side is upper tight line. It's something I'm obsessed with. I think it gives you the illusion of, I don't wanna say falsies, but you get a much more volumized lash line instantly, and I can get away with doing way less individuals. So I'm just gonna tilt my head back and take a black liner and just focus that on the upper lash line. And I find instantly you'll notice that your eye just like, it pops so much more. Okay, we've got to do some faux freckles because it's not a Jaclyn look without faux freckles. So I'm gonna show you how I used to do my faux freckles when I started to learn. I took my same eyeliner and I just twirled it and did perfect little cartoon polka dots, which if you're going for a very stylized makeup look and like this very doll-like cartoony makeup, then it looks adorable. But if you're trying to make them look natural, this is not the best way. So I would then take my finger and just kind of blot it out like that. But for the most part, it would just kind of be like that. Not the best look. So on the do side, what I like to do is go in with a little bit of bronzer, kind of set the base up a bit more. I'm just gonna bring a bit more kind of bronzer, almost like this front part of the cheek where you tend to get a bit more like of a sunburn sometimes. And if someone has natural freckles, when they tan, it typically kind of appears on that little spot right there. So I'm gonna go in with Freck, which is this amazing freckle maker. And I'm going to kind of create more organic, kind of sporadic shapes because that's gonna be more realistic to what freckles actually look like. And then I'm just gonna kind of take my finger and again, dot it around a bit more. But this is gonna be a way better color, a lot more believable, and just a way better shape overall. Just kind of like that. Okay, now let's go and deal with these crusty looking lips. These have so much foundation in them. Let's start with the don't side. Okay, so with the don't side, I've actually got the perfect colors here. I've got Pillow Talk Medium 2 that I'm gonna be using on the don't side, and then Pillow Talk, the original formula, on the do side. And the Pillow Talk 2 is just a bit deeper. I'm just gonna show you so you can kind of see the different shape that I'm creating. So I'm basically gonna focus on the idea of overlining. And now I'm gonna let you know I am a huge fan of overlining. I overline my lips all the time. And I'm always kind of playing around with different shapes because I just kind of have fun with it. And on myself, I tend to actually like the look of like a faux kind of like lip injection kind of look. I've never had my lips done, but I kind of like to create that illusion on myself, at least right now. But what I'm going to talk to you is specifically about overlining. There definitely still are some kind of do's and don'ts, and something that I see a lot, especially when I watch a lot of like kind of celebrity makeup tutorials or just videos about overlining, a lot of them tell you to overline the Cupid's bow a lot. And I just find it looks actually so so bad on myself, and I find it not believable because I have quite a defined Cupid's bow. Like I have quite a like bony, kind of spiny little like lines that go up on top, so it's very noticeable, and you can clearly see where my lip shape is supposed to meet. So if I do anything other than that, you can very easily tell as soon as I move my mouth. And I find the place where I have, you know, I'm lacking in volume a little bit and there's less of a definitive edge is actually more towards the kind of outer corner. So I actually like to cheat the shape a little bit more out there. Now, again, this can vary on lip to lip shape, but I'm gonna kind of go in and show you what I don't think is the most flattering. So I'm gonna start above the Cupid's bow and kind of flatten it out. And a lot of these videos I find tell you to kind of shorten the lip shape because it gives you more appearance of like a pouty kind of look. I find a lot of these lip contour kind of techniques also tell you to do these lines to kind of create the illusion of like a pillowy soft lip, but I don't know about that one. Now I'm gonna go over top with a much lighter lipstick and attempt to kind of highlight. Okay, on to the do side. I'm gonna go in with Pillow Talk, which is basically the exact same color as my lips. And I am going to follow the natural shape at first. And again, don't forget we have that little contour under there, so we're already gonna kind of get the illusion of like a poutier lip without doing a lot. Now I like to kind of keep my lip shape, not necessarily pointy, but I like the top of my Cupid's bow to kind of meet at that shape versus a super smooth round curve like that, because that's how my lips naturally are shaped. Now, like I said, I need the most help kind of on this upper outer part, so I'm gonna add a little bit of a curvature, but I'm actually going to keep my mouth still and look at it when it's closed because that's gonna give you the best kind of idea of what to do. And then I'm gonna take the lip liner and just kind of shade it inwards so that way I'm still kind of creating a bit of a shadow and dimension, but in a much more subtle way. So there we go. Both lips are overlined, clearly giving off different effects. Now I actually, especially in recent years, have really shied away from lipstick, and I typically like to just go in with a gloss or like a really glossy looking lip balm just because it's more comfortable. I'm gonna show you what it looks like. I actually really like the effect because you get that highlight effect with the gloss because it's so reflective. So I'm gonna go in, this is actually the Too Faced Lip Injection Gloss here, and I'm gonna pop this more towards the center of the lip. I also am such a gloss girl. I know some people hate gloss, but I just love the look of gloss and the feeling doesn't bother me at all. Okay, so there we go. This is the finished look. I'm curious what you guys think. You know, from far enough away, lit properly, this side I honestly don't think is completely horrendous, but I have to say, I think the techniques on this side, they're way more my makeup style. I think they're a lot more flattering, especially if you are just going for more of an enhanced kind of look where you just want your features to look a bit elevated. And I don't know, I think it's so interesting. It's so funny to think that I did the same amount of products and the same steps of makeup on both sides, but you have such a different effect. I think that's what's honestly just so fun about makeup. But yeah, I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are on this and if there's any techniques that you like from this side or if you like to mix and match or how that kind of works. You wanna know what it is? There's just really something about the contour, and this is what I mean about the shape. It looks fine maybe from front on, but when you go sideways, something's not happening right. Okay, well, there we go. This is the makeup do's and don'ts. I hope honestly, if you took anything away, you learned some new techniques or you're hopefully maybe reimagining some steps of your makeup. Yeah, this was actually a really fun video to film. It's been on my list, I swear, probably for 3 years. Thank God I didn't film it 3 years ago because even my makeup 3 years ago I probably won't like. So here we are today. Let me know how you like it. If you did, make sure you subscribe, give it a thumbs up, comment, follow, like, do all the things. Oh, before I go, speaking of my merch that I'm wearing, even though this is not the finished version, if you are interested in getting yourself a little hand-dyed, ethical tie-dye sweatsuit that's made here in Toronto, I still have a few of my sweatsuits left. It says long story long. It just makes sense because I can't make a long story short, quite honestly. So I'll have a link to shop Jaclyn Forbes down below in case you want to check that out. And you know, we're all working from home these days, so a matching sweatsuit is really just what I live in, and I think everyone should be living in. So check it out down below if you did want to shop my merch. But other than that, I'll see you all very soon. Thanks so much. Bye.